What is going on, everybody, and welcome to another Starcraft 2 AI video. In the last video, we made this very basic kind of bare bones script. All we're doing is collecting resources with our workers, and eventually the enemy comes and destroys us. It seems to be happening within about 1 to 2,000 steps. So we probably want to learn how to build up some base defenses to some extent, as well as just learning how to build buildings and what to build and when, and how to kind of navigate around this order of operations that has to take place. So at least in this video, what I'd like to have us do is build some cannons at the base. So in order to build those cannons, bringing over our kind of map of things, in order to build a photon cannon, that's what we want, we need to first have a forge. And then again, to have a forge, we need to have a nexus, but we start with a nexus. So we should have one unless it's been destroyed. So closing this, and then I'll just move this out of the way. Let's go ahead and begin our logic. So I'll continue just printing out that iteration. That's fine. You can also print out various bits of information here for debugging purposes if you want. But there are some things that are displayed, and you can kind of see them on the screen anyways. When you build units and build buildings, you should be able to see them. So anyway, what we'll do is the first thing that we're going to check is we're going to check to see if self.townhalls. And essentially, this is, I think, the generic way of checking to see if a nexus-like thing exists. So self.townhalls is generic across the three races. So if there is a town hall, that means we have a nexus. So we're going to say the nexus equals self.townhalls, and then we're going to grab a random one. Unless we've built more, this will be our only one anyways. But what if we don't have a town hall, right? So what if we don't have that nexus? So if we don't actually have that nexus, what we're going to want to do is build it. So else, if self.can_afford, and then we're going to do a unit type ID dot on an all caps nexus. So if we can afford a nexus, we will await a self.expand_now. So we need to import the unit type ID. Let me see what that is too. Yeah, so we'll go up to the top here, and we will say from sc2.ids dot unit underscore type ID. We're going to import unit type ID. I'll put a link in the description as well to async. If you don't know much about using async, I'll have a link in the description for kind of what to expect with async if you're curious to learn more. But essentially, what this is going to do is if we don't have a nexus, our top priority is to build a nexus. So, okay, cool. So if we do have a nexus, though, what do we want to do? So if we have a nexus, one of the things that we can do is build more of these little worker units for the Protoss class, and those are called probes. So one thing we could say is if nexus dot is underscore idle and self dot can underscore afford the unit type ID dot and all caps probe. So if we can afford a probe, we will do a nexus dot train, and we will do unit type ID dot and then all caps probe. So this will actually train our probe if we can. So if that's the case, cool. So we'll make some probes. Now, eventually you're probably going to want to limit the actual probes. You're not going to want an infinite number of probes, but for now this will be fine. So the next thing is pylons. So for the Protoss class, again, all the classes are a little different. But for the Protoss class, in order to power your buildings and to warp in units, you use pylons, and the pylons create I forget the name of the matrix, but it's some sort of matrix so you kind of want all your pylons close together, and then in order to build a building in some location, you have to have a pylon there to power it. So we are going to need some pylons. So the next thing, so first of all, we need probes. How many probes we need, we'll identify that later. But, in the order of importance, we need our nexus, we need probes, and then if we have probes, we want to use at least one of those probes. If we don't have any pylons, we want at least one pylon, but probably we'll want more over time. But for sure, we want at least one pylon. So, for example, we could say elif not self.structure structures, and then again unit type ID dot in all caps pylon, and then again and self dot already pending. Make sure it's not running over me. Cool. Basically what we want to do is if that's not already pending, so if self.already pending unit type ID dot pylon equals 0. So if we don't have any pylons and we don't have any pylons that we're about to build, then we're going to say if self.can underscore afford. So then the next question, like basically everything else, if we can afford the unit type ID dot pylon, if we can afford that, then we will await self.build, and then again unit type ID pylon, and we're going to build that pylon. There's all these like little helper things that you can do within this package, and we're going to say we want to build it near the nexus. So again, we've just defined the nexus up here. Now, for all of these things, there are like these are just nice, nifty little ways that we can like build things close to other things. But this obviously this is abstracting away exactly where you might want to build that that pylon. So in the future, you might want to consider possibly using even more advanced logic besides just build it somewhere near this thing. But this will do for now. So the pylons, along with providing power to your buildings and the ability to just build buildings and use things and warp things in. The other thing that these pylons do is give you like supply. And this supply, you need supply for buildings and units. So again, one pylon probably is not going to cut it for us. So we're going to need multiple pylons. So again, I'm just going to, now that we've had at least one pylon. So if you have no pylons, you want to build that first pylon near a nexus. But if you have at least one pylon, then basically from here on out, you want to build your subsequent pylons near other pylons, unless I guess maybe you're starting a new location. I don't know. I think they all need to be connected though. So what I'm going to say here is elif self.structures, and then we're going to say unit type ID dot pylon dot amount. If the amount is less than 5, then we're going to say if self.can afford, and in fact, I'm just going to do this, bloop, and paste. So if we can afford one, then what we want to do is first we want to find the pylon that we want to build it next to. So again, I'm just take this with a grain of salt here. We're going to say the target pylon is going to be equal to self.structures, and then unit. I almost need to like copy and paste unit type ID pylon. I've typed that out too many times. So we're going to say the pylon that is dot closest underscore to, and then it'll be self.enemy underscore start locations, and we'll say 0. So you could have multiple enemies, and in this case, we just happen to have one enemy. And so we're just going to assume we only have that one enemy, and we're going to continue expanding towards that enemy. This could be anything, though. It doesn't have to be closest to that enemy. It could be closest to, I don't know, maybe you'll identify what's the next like cluster of resources that you want to begin like mining. Maybe you would want to expand that way. I'm just showing you the logic. So this will be the logic that we're going to use, but there's probably way better ideas here. So do what you want with this. So that's the target pylon. So this, what we've done so far is we've just said, hey, which pylon do we want to say this is the pylon we want to build close to? That's the one. So it's just the one that is closest to the enemy's starting location. So then what we're going to say is we have that pylon. We're going to say, where do we want to essentially build that pylon? So we're going to say the position that we want to build that, we're going to say is target underscore pylon dot position dot towards, and then self dot enemy start locations 0. So we'll continue building it towards that enemy start location, and then random dot rand range 8 to 15. And I took that range from, I think, one of the like starting scripts, possibly. I don't know. Anyways, it seems like that's like the range that people are using for pylons. Like I said, it makes this little matrix, and the pylons like have to be in range of each other in order to continue building out that matrix. So it just seems like that is a good range to use. So since we've called in random, we haven't imported that. So we'll go ahead and import random. So coming back down here, so that will be the position that we want to build at. And then so finally we will, and in fact, we're going to do this. We're going to say await. And then rather than near nexus, we're going to say near that position. I think that will suffice. Okay, so that will get us to build pylons. And I think what I'm going to do is I'd like to run this real quick. Make sure we're not off to a terrible start. Python 3 sc2-2.py. Let us see what we've got. Up. Okay, so unit sc2 IDs. Let's see if I've typoed that. Okay, hold on. sc2 .ids .unit type ID import. What is the problem? I'm just going to copy and paste from my notes and see. I don't know if I'm unit type ID. I honestly don't see it, but am I? What's the difference? No. Oh. Okay. The capital. It was the capital D here. Wow. Rough. That's a rough one. Okay. Hashtag programming. I should have known that. Like so many times, it's that second letter is not capitalized. I shouldn't have made that mistake, but oh well. Anyways, okay. Try again. So all we're hoping for is we're still going to get crushed by the enemy AI. But what I'm hoping to see is that we build more pylons towards the enemy up, and instead we do nothing. Unit. Oh gosh, we got to replace like, oh no, that's just terrible. So we need to replace all the capital IDs with the undercase unit type ID, right? Well, how many times? Okay, so I guess it's not case. Okay. All right. Gosh. I'm just trying to test these pylons, man. This is a lot of effort. Okay, we are off. I don't want to stream it to my friends, thank you. We can see actually supply has gone up, and indeed, you know, we've got a pylon here. This is a pylon. This is a pylon. These are some pylons. These are more pylons. So, and you can see this is the little matrix, right? So that, I guess that range is just how we keep them somewhat in that matrix, but those are obviously a little too close. So you might want to like come up with some better logic. Like I said, we're here, we're just playing in a sandbox. So I'm sure there's better things that we can do over time. But as you also I think our supply, you know, went up to like 63 or something like that. So so that gives us room for more units, more probes possibly. But the other thing I do want to show actually before the other thing I want to show is that our Nexus probably wound up with too many probes for that Nexus. So the Nexus has like a limit of like 16 probes. And I think, like, again, I'm not the expert here, but from a quick look online, it seemed to suggest, like, you can see, eventually we'll probably see, so you see like 17, 18, 19, 20. You can have more than 16, and I think it scales all the way up to 24, and then everything out, like, so 16 is like the most efficient worker I guess every worker is very efficient, and then up to 24, it becomes less and less efficient. And then anything beyond that, the workers will just sit there. Like you probably saw a couple of them sitting there. So eventually you want to make sure that you're just not making worthless probes. But before we've built buildings and built our other units, I'm not too worried about figuring out what should that number be, because you could just say you could limit your probes to be no more than 16. But then if you're going to do that, eventually you're probably going to want to expand and build more things, or like have probes that aren't necessarily there to collect minerals, but maybe they're there to build further buildings if we get under attack. Yeah, I really don't know. So I just don't have the answer. So we're not going to worry about that right now. It's not a problem right now because it's not like they're clogging up us to build any other unit. So we built our pylons, and now that we've got pylons, I think what we should do is build our cannons. So in this case, what was the last, at least that one, about 1,500. I think the first game that we ran, it was like 1,600 that we died at, and then the game that we ran before that, I guess. Okay. Anyway, somewhere between 1 and 2,000 still, but yeah, at least these two was 1,500 and 1,600. So let's build the cannons. And again, to build a cannon, we are going to need that forge building. So what we're going to do is, again, order of importance. We definitely must have a nexus. We can't do anything building wise without at least a nexus. Once we have a nexus, pylons are more important than anything else, at least for this class, this Protoss class. So the next thing is, or where we're going to put the forge is just going to be right after the pylons, at least in this case. Later we might decide other things have different importance, but for now, with what we're planning to build, the least important thing now is the forge, but we still want one. So after we've done these things. So elif not self dot, and in this case we can check for structures. So self dot structures, and then here's our good friend unit type ID dot all caps forge. So if we don't yet have a forge, if we self dot can underscore afford a unit type ID dot forge, then let's go ahead and await a self dot build a unit type ID forge, there you are. And then again, we have a near equals, and let me see what I did in the tutorial here. Okay, so in this case, again, everything has to be within that little pylon matrix. So in this case, it will be near, and I'm doing a self.structures. Self.structures? That text, I don't know if that text is too small for you guys still or not. Let me know in the chat if this text is too small. Self.structures, it's tough because these lines are pretty long, so I'm sorry for the cell phone viewers, but I don't know how to make that any better. Near self.structures, and then again, this will be a unit type ID dot pylon. So we want to build it near a pylon, but then also we probably want this stuff to be condensed into our main base area. So we're going to say unit type ID dot pylon dot closest underscore to that nexus. Again, we're selecting nexus purely by, we're saying all the nexuses and then a random nexus. So at some point, if you build more nexuses, you might want to use a different thing. You might say nexus equals self.townhalls and then maybe the 0th one or something like that. Whatever. So keep that in mind. Closest to the nexus. Cool. So this will build us hopefully a forge. And then the other thing we might want to say is, I wonder if we can, I don't know if that'll be necessary. I would hate to build multiple forges, but we await, I don't know. Hopefully that won't be a problem. We'll see. We'll just, whatever. If it's a problem and we wind up building multiple forges at the same time, then I'll worry about it. So self-to-build forge closest to the nexus. So then, again, elif. So we'll build that forge. Otherwise, and again, this whole time, our little workers apparently are just working all on their own. So So this stuff is not like screwing that up. Like those guys seem to be just like collecting minerals all on their own, so it's not really a problem to be like just this super long elif chain. That's not going to block our resource collection rather. So if the forge, we'll build it. The next thing is we need, now if we do have a forge, so elif self.structures, unit type ID dot forge, and then if that forge is dot ready, and self dot structures, let's see here, self dot structures and of structures unit type ID dot photon cannon in all caps, if that dot amount is less than 3. So if we have less than 3 photon cannons, I'm just wondering too, who would be following along on mobile for Starcraft 2? Maybe that's impossible. If you're running Starcraft 2 on your phone, holler at me in the chat. So if we have less than 3, so we're going to limit our photon cannons. Again, just like all these other numbers, I'm just like making these numbers up. So feel free to like tinker with various different numbers. Maybe you want to build more cannons. There's even a strategy where you like rush the enemy base and build a bunch of cannons at their base. So feel free to play with this. You could go with more or less or whatever. So I'm just going to say 3 for now. So if it's less than 3, what do we want to do? Well, if it is less than 3, then we're going to if self dot can afford. So if we can afford a unit type ID. I almost want to like alias this with something else. So I don't have to keep talking that, but that's okay. Unit type ID. So if we can afford the photon cannon, then what we're going to do is await self dot build, and we will build that unit type ID photon cannon. And again, we'll build that. The thing we're trying to protect really here is our nexus. So we'll build that near the nexus. And with that, I think we're pretty good. Now, I did say that this won't, like, none of this will interfere with our little worker dudes. But at least one thing I did notice, and in fact, we'll just run this and I'll point it out. But it seems like once they build a building, they just like hang out. They don't do anything after that. So hopefully we'll see an example of that. At the moment, we have too many probes anyways. They end up going idle, so it's not really a big deal, but it might be something we would want to address. So we'll at least address that before we're done here. But anyway, we can see here, okay, we got our forge. Here's 1 cannon, 2 cannons. We might, again, as with all the logic, we might really ideally want to like spread these out more, or like figure out, like, for example, there's this like little ramp, and I think anything, at least any ground force that would want to attack us would have to come up this ramp as they just did. How far along are we? We're at 1300. Wow, they like just came and attacked really quickly, didn't they? I think I'm not sure what's going on with these cannons. What's the problem here? Is the supply new? No, I'm not really sure what happened to those cannons. I don't know if those are actually working or not. I don't think that's how they look. Anyways, it looks like we are beginning to lose. But we did survive quite a bit longer. We survived at least a few rounds of attack. So again, we're not going to win by purely playing defense, but it appears that at least 3 cannons does a thing. Now, those workers did, I forgot to mention, like the idle workers. And in fact, I'll just break it here. Let's solve the idle worker. You know what they say about idle workers. So what we'll do is, this will be outside of its, is self.town halls. I guess I'm trying to decide if this really, I don't know where this exactly should go, but first of all, we'll just throw it outside of that if statement. Await self.distribute workers. So this will take your idle workers and put them back to work. I think I'll just copy and paste. You don't have to have this if you don't want, but if you want, head over to the text-based version. I'm not going to write this out. I'm not going to waste everybody's time writing this out. But this is a very long print statement that basically tells us the numbers of all of the things that at least we'll be interested in this tutorial series, at least for the next at least 1 to 2 videos. So this is just telling us how many workers do we have, how many of them are idle, how much materials have we collected, have we gotten any gas, which we haven't covered yet, but at least I showed you where the gas was. How many cannons do we have? Pylons, nexus, gateways, cybernetics cores, and then obviously, so we need gateways, cybernetics cores, stargates to build the void rays. And then finally, supply. So this is just how much supply used out of what is our actual full cap. So it just gives us a lot of information that hopefully that way, if we end a game again, and I forget to look at a stat or something, I can just pull that up again. But again, you don't really have to have all that. And like I said, I'm not typing all that out. That would just be a waste of everybody's time. Okay, so we're off. Oh, we didn't save. It's like, where's my print? We'll wait for it again. All right, now we've got our giant print statement. So as we can see, okay, we are building, we've got our forge up, we've got our cannons up. They look to be placed horribly. Yeah, I think you maybe near Nexus towards the enemy or something like that, or you would want to find that ramp, I guess. Okay, so we actually survived that first attack, which actually came around 1,000 frames, or 1,000 steps rather, which is very interesting. We lost a lot of pylons, I suppose. Workers. Why is it? I couldn't even tell you why is it workers 0/8. I don't even know. Someone tell me in the chat below why did our Nexus workers drop? Anyway, so at least we're redistributing those workers, but probably, yeah, well, they all died at that point. Let's go. So we have 33 workers, 0 idle workers. So at least they're off doing something, but they were probably actually kind of sort of idle because we have too many workers for the Nexus, but they can't do anything anyways. But again, I wouldn't really worry that much about that simply because eventually we're going to build other buildings and use up supply and use up our various resources, and we're probably not going to be building just probes. Like probes at the very beginning are like they are at the tippity top of our script essentially, but soon when we get to the point of building like attack units, those will probably take priority over the probes. So I don't really foresee that being a problem for long. Otherwise, I think this is a good stopping point. We've built a few buildings. We've got a basic defense forming here, and I think the video has gotten of a decent length. So I'll stop it here. I will say for these videos, I'm reading off of my own notes. So you might be wondering like, okay, well, how did you learn all of this stuff? Well, one is you can just read the package. You can go to the documentation and figure out like various things like these methods like .closest to and all this kind of stuff. There's so many things that have just been done for you that are saving you a ton of time through abstraction. So read the documentation. There's also example scripts. So if you go to that GitHub, there are example scripts that you can read, get ideas for like things that you can do and all that. So it's not magic. I haven't memorized this library by any means. I'm just showing you some of the things that are available to you and kind of how to begin thinking about working with this stuff. So that's all for now. In the next video, we will build an attack force and hopefully take on this Zerg enemy and hopefully defeat them. So we'll see. Questions, comments, concerns, whatever, you know the deal. Leave them below. Otherwise, I will see you guys in another video.